So this is a channel mostly built on videos about healing Mythic Plus, and last week was the first week in months I didn't record a new video. And this one's a little awkward to make, but yeah, I pretty much stopped healing a few weeks ago, so let's talk about why I did it and how it worked out. So just to give you an idea of where I'm coming from, I almost exclusively pug keys in the 3k range of dungeon score, and honestly, playing a healer in pug groups has not been fun in Season 2 for the most part, but in particular after 10.1.5, became even worse. The gap between Holy Paladin and the rest of the field was widening, and as a Resto Druid main, finding a group for a key that was an actual score upgrade was a long and arduous process. When I did finally find one, the margin for error when healing pugs in Season 2 is razor thin, and as little as a misused cooldown or a lazy ramp could mean the end of a key. I've played all roles at reasonably high levels in the past, and I don't think I've ever had to deal with such a slim margin of error. There's definitely a conundrum with healers right now. In the past, there's been complaints that healing was too easy and basically just a glorified 4th DPS slot. With Dragonflight, Blizzard seems to be trying to fix that by designing dungeons that require a lot of healing, as well as continually nerfing healing power. I think pushing healers to actually heal is a good thing, and some of the moves that have been made are a step in the right direction. But what I feel when healing keys right now is that all the healing pressure is kind of baked down into very specific moments. Moments where you're basically required to have your cooldowns planned out and executed really cleanly to survive. And as the key levels increase, these moments need to be cleaner and cleaner to the point of pretty much perfection. Perfection, that is, if you don't have something like bleed removals, mass dispel, a lot of defensive or off healing help coming from the other players in your group to trivialize the mechanics. This is where the current meta comes in. When you're running Holy Paladin, Aug Evoker, Guardian Druid, Shadow Priest, Fire Mage, the amount of tools you have to mitigate these intense moments of incoming damage is pretty nuts. That's 2 immunities, bleed removals, mass dispel, as well as every dispel type in the book, added survivability with your Aug Evoker, and a load of potential off healing, even post-nerf. Compare that to the tools an off-meta group has at their disposal, and I think the gap between the meta 5 and the rest of the field is as wide as I ever remember it being. And when you're pugging, even at higher levels, depending on your teammates to help you with group survivability is really risky business. A lot of times, it's just not going to happen. So I think Blizzard has a tough job on their hands, keeping healing interesting for players running high-end coordinated groups so they don't feel like they're not doing anything, and keeping the experience enjoyable for the bulk of the player base that is not playing in that situation. I do think the overall lack of people willing to heal this season is evidence that they pushed the envelope too far in one direction. I think it would be really hard to argue that there's not a healer shortage right now in Mythic Plus. Especially when I do mid-level keys on my alts, I find that we end up waiting an obscenely long time to get a healer, and that kind of leads me to believe that the average player is not enjoying healing right now. I know you need to keep your game balanced at the high end for a variety of reasons, but alienating your average WoW player away from the healing role in one of your most popular game modes is definitely not a good way to keep your 20-year-old game chugging along. There are some pretty significant nerfs coming to the Meta 5 really soon at the time of recording this video, but Blizzard is targeting small to moderate damage and healing nerfs that won't really address the problem here. Yes, there's some overtuning in the works here, but there's definitely more than that. I think the real problem is that you designed a pool of dungeons that necessitate mass dispel, bleed removals, damage reductions, and a whole lot of healing throughput, and now you're nerfing the specs that have these things by touching up their damage. Because of this, I kind of see Season 2 as flawed, and I probably think it's going to stay that way and be in a weird place for the rest of its existence, and it also kind of shows a lack of understanding on Blizzard's part, to be honest. I really hope that they learn from these mistakes in Season 3 and don't pigeonhole us into needing certain specs utility just to get by. So with the release of 10.1.5 and Augmentation Evoker, having a fully geared Season 1 Evoker sitting on the bench, I decided to give the spec a go. And the thing that stood out to me more than anything was how highly desired Aug was in keys. I was getting invites to keys that my IO score and item level suggested I had no business doing, and in a matter of a literal week, I'd nearly caught my Resto Druid I'd been grinding away on all season long. This alone was pretty depressing, and although I was having fun playing Evoker, I felt kinda dirty to take what was truly an easy path up the M+ ranks. I've joked about the spec being easy to play, but honestly, I do think the difference between an average augmentation player that just maintains his buff and a good one that uses his utility appropriately is actually still pretty big. Still, I think the former can get really far in M+. But yeah, honestly, the thing that pushed me toward AUG was the literal wait time between keys as a pug. As a streamer, I try not to sit in Valdrakken for too long if I can help it, because it's understandably boring for my viewers, and the time it started to take me to find a group on my druid was getting kinda silly. This is going to apply to anyone with limited time, and I actually think it's a legit reason for someone not playing in a static group to gravitate toward the meta. You're literally getting to play the game more. And then there's simply the gameplay factor. Healing this season is funneled into really high pressure moments where there's very little margin for error, and in some cases, you're relying on an external source for help, like a timely mass dispel or a bleed removal. When I went AUG, I could be that external source for my healer, and as a healer main, I felt like I knew the pain points of healing the various dungeons, and I could really leverage my utility to help my healer keep people alive. The support role had the support aspect of being a healer without the white knuckle pressure of feeling like the entire key rests on your shoulders, and it was a really nice change of pace. If support specs continue to get rolled out by Blizzard, I'd consider focusing on them as my main. So am I done with healing? Definitely not, but I did need a break from it. And as for what I'd like to see in Season 3, I'd like to see the gameplay style shift a bit. When I play my healers, it feels like my normal healing rotation does very little except maybe maintain my group's health. If I want to do any significant healing at all, it's coming from cooldowns. This is what creates this feast or famine, high pressure moments of huge burst I've been talking about. I'd love to see healing in a place where your regular rotation actually has some impact, and where all your significance as a healer isn't boiled down to your performance in a handful of key moments throughout the dungeon. I also hope that whatever the Season 3 dungeon pool ends up being, it's a little more varied in damage sources so that more specs utility is actually valued. Having a dungeon or two where Mass Dispel is really important is fine. When it's nearly every dungeon though, that essentially reserves a spot for a priest. Bleed's absolutely wrecking people, now we need an evoker or a paladin or both. I've never really understood how Blizzard decides to distribute utility across classes, as there's always been the haves and have-nots, but the haves excel in Mythic Plus, and the problem with this dungeon pool is that the same utility needs pop up over and over again, and the meta gets set in stone super hard. Alright healers, let me know what you think. Am I just being a big baby and healing in Season 2 is actually a whole ton of fun for you, or do you agree that healing needs to be touched up in some way? I always love to hear from you guys in the comments section. Make sure you thumbs up the video if you made it this far and you enjoyed it. Subscribe to see more, and please check out my stream here on YouTube, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, 9 p.m. Pacific. Have a great community of players in there. It's a ton of fun. Come and hang out sometime. Until next time guys, happy healing.